Moneyball has become a shorthand term for the use of data in sport, but it is not simply that. It is about finding what is undervalued and then using that to determine players who cost less than they should. Used correctly, this simple insight has had incredible ramifications in baseball and is already changing the way that football clubs recruit. The term comes from Michael Lewis's book about Billy Beane. Beane had everything as a player, what scouts call the 5 tools: running, throwing, fielding, hitting, and hitting with power. When he failed as a player, he vowed never to think about baseball in the same way. Lewis's book charts how Beane, by then general manager at the poor, unfashionable Oakland A's, used data to determine player recruitment and achieved remarkable success on a modest budget. Beane, following Bill James, the father of using baseball stats intelligently, realised that on-base percentage, how often a player gets on base, was more important than pure hitting or glory plays like bunts or stealing bases. Beane started to look for players who had been discarded but had great on-base percentage and were therefore undervalued. Baseball didn't take on-base percentage seriously, but Beane did, and he started winning for peanuts. Football recruitment has often been flawed. Big-name signings make fans feel happy, but if a player has already peaked or has only done well at an international tournament, they're probably overvalued. The availability heuristic, the idea that the more easily you can call something to mind, the more weight you give it in decision-making, means that scouts often privilege recent performances over long-term trends. Ex-pro scouts and managers also tend to overweigh their own experience when making decisions, as if it's the most valid. It isn't. The first managers to really grasp value were Brian Clough and Peter Taylor. Even though they didn't use data, the pair would look for players with personal issues who clubs didn't want, and then help them through those issues. Kenny Burns was overweight, liked a fight and a drink, but Clough and Taylor picked him up for next to nothing and turned him into 1978's Football Writers' Footballer of the Year. They still used eye and gut, but the sense that some players were cheaper than Clough and Taylor thought they ought to be was crucial to their successes with Derby and with Nottingham Forest. As numbers started to proliferate in football, thanks in part to Opta and Prozone, it seemed like they might be the answer to player recruitment. Possession, tackling, and passing were suddenly in vogue as metrics, not just things that happened on a pitch. But numbers alone don't tell you much unless you can read them, and crucially, find value. Nonetheless, data can help a club pick up a bargain. In 2014, N'Golo Kante made 4.8 tackles per game, 2.9 interceptions per game, and 0.9 clearances per game for the small club FC Caen, only promoted to League One the season prior. Leicester spotted that, bought him for £7.65 million and won the league. As a defensive midfielder, 5'6.5" Kante was too small for most scouts, but the numbers told a story that the eye missed. When Kante moved to Chelsea, Leicester made a profit of over £20 million. Liverpool, whose owner John Henry is a big fan of Billy Beane and Bill James, have tried a version of Moneyball at the club with some successes and some failures. Brentford famously used data-driven recruitment for half a season before changing their minds. Numbers were used to whittle down lists of players who were then scouted by video and finally in person. But these are the high-profile instances. Data is now used by all sensible clubs to find the next Kante. The key is finding the undervalued statistic that correlates to winning before anyone else does. That is Moneyball.